We're so excited, everybody, because Spark is back for a limited run engagement in November.
Yeah, we are so excited. We had a great run in July. We heard from a lot of people that they want more. So we are happy to let you know that we've added 3 shows, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The performances will take place in Norwalk, Connecticut at an amazing venue. It's the personal studio and performance venue of an incredible artist named Five Fingers. And the venue is called the Art Monster Studio. We will put the ticket link in our bio as well as on our website, woowoointherealworld.com. You won't want to miss this production, and we hope to see you there. My joy is her joy, is his joy, and our joy to share.
Welcome back to season 4. We are in season 4 of Woo Woo in the Real World. First off, I can't believe that we're in season 4. And second off, I can't believe it took us this long to get to season 4 this year.
Oh, it's so great to be back. I feel like
So
there's
good.
so much that we have to catch our audience up on,
Oh my
right?
gosh, so much. Yeah, when we recorded season 3, it was at the very beginning of 2024. I mean, people may listen to this, who knows, down in the road in the future. So we recorded all those episodes early 2024. And I think we were still a little bit in our like, I don't really know. I don't really know. Like, we don't really know what's going on mode. And then super quickly this year, it became very clear to both of us in our own respective lives of like, oh, you don't know what's going on. Some people say that being able to say that is actually when wisdom starts to come in. And I have to believe them because we said that so many times last season and the season before
It was kind
of
of
I
like our
just,
unofficial mantra.
it really was, right? It was just like, we just don't know. And we had to live in this really uncomfortable, unknown space of what we were supposed to be doing professionally. And for me, kind of personally, where my life was going and different things of really uncomfortable sitting.
Hmm.
And we recorded season 3 at the beginning of 2024. And by, it was like February of 2024, February, March of 2024, it became like, wham, here you
Shit
go,
started to go
ladies.
down.
Here you go, ladies, which is why now it is almost October and we are just recording season 4 because it has been a whirlwind. Do you want to go first, Tammy, and catch the good people up?
Wow. Wow. I don't know. That's quite an intro. But let me just say that to kind of build on what you were saying, the last time, we were recording and interviewing our guests for season 3, we were also talking about this new energy of 2024. It's an
Yeah.
8 universal year. So I just want to like take a moment and revisit that because we have a little bit of wisdom now as we enter into October, right? So we're coming up on 8 months of this 2024 universal energy year. And, we started those conversations about this is the year that the universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, whatever, your higher power says enough is enough. It's time to be your authentic self, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to
Mm-hmm.
shed all of the stuff that is not serving you, and you need to create space for like your next level of growth and expansion, right? And so you and I really leaned into that. We welcomed it, right? When you said we just don't know, we just don't know. Um, in many ways, each of us we were and still are in these transition moments, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
constantly reflecting or observing or really trying to understand. I think for me personally, I will say my shadow self and just really illuminating all of that. Like, what are these false narratives that I'm telling myself? Where do these belief systems come from? Is that
Yeah.
really serving me? Do I really believe that? Right? And why do I believe that? I know you and I have had so many conversations about that.
So many.
And
Yeah.
so, like, that's what these months have been like, right? At the same
Mm-hmm.
time, so much synchronicity for each of us,
So
so much
much.
stuff falling into place, right? Like, and really, so last year we spoke a lot, not last year, last season, we spoke a lot with each other as well as our guests about really embodying our
Mm,
soul's calling,
mm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And each guest had their own kind of perspective on that. Obviously, we are all unique and we have our own journeys on that. And so that was really fascinating. And then to enter into this particular season, season four, um, really focusing on, okay, we're embodying it. This energy is happening universally in the collective, but like, what does that mean for us individually? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we made some really like incredible strides on going even farther out of our comfort zone to make decisions that we say, you know what, this is what my heart is telling me, right? Like, you're moving back to Indiana. We're going to
I
talk about
know.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
in November.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it, but we have to talk about it because it's happening,
Because it's
right?
happening.
And for me, I shed, so like you shed kind of this very personal space of yours in terms of like where you want to live, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
for
what
me
is,
it was attachments. You were talking
yeah,
about beliefs, moving past limiting beliefs and maybe fears. For me, it was attachments and fears
that's right.
and things that I'm attached to and really coming to terms with, what are you really hooked by? What are you really attached by?
That's
Both
right.
physically, spiritually, emotionally, like all of it, all of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Heavy, 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 heavy work.
Heavy work, right? And
Hmm.
the amazing thing is when you do that work and you do, I've been really focusing on these three words, which are surrender,
Mm.
trust, and expand, right? And that's
Hmm.
where the growth comes in, right? The surrendering part is incredibly difficult. It's
It
incredible.
is.
And especially people like us, like we're doers, we're creative, we are constantly like, not so much about the to-do list, but like, who are we list, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like what do we want to do, as Mary Oliver says, like with our one wild and precious life? We're extremely focused on that, I
Good
feel like.
point.
So
Good
we
point.
do have a desire and a drive that kind of pushes us because we have this feeling of like we're here, we're meant to do something with this life. And we just don't want to quote waste time not doing it. But at the same time, sometimes you have to wait and sit in a waiting room and in a waiting period before
Hmm.
you can kind of get on with things.
Right.
And I feel like that's where we were for so many of the seasons of this show. And
Hmm.
now I feel like we're actually out of the waiting room and we're in the doing part.
Right. Right. And the thing that is so fascinating to me about it, right? So, you found this house, you're getting it all together, you're going to be moving. For me, I also was really attached to spaces and places, right? And I
Hmm.
completely shed those as
Yeah.
well and had this sort of untethered moment myself. Not that I'm moving house or anything, but it's just like, what do I want my work and physical world and creative world? What do I want that to look like? And once I shed physical attachments to actual spaces, a lot of expansion opened up for me, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's funny to me because our last guest, and we didn't plan this, but our last guest in season 3 was Nydia.
that's right.
And Nydia is about, she does the space, kind of the energy in the space and the energy in the home.
Hmm.
And we had this conversation with her before I was moving to Indiana, like
Oh,
before I
that's
knew about that. And I
right.
remember going into that conversation, you had worked with Nydia, and so you guys had already had a language and an understanding about space and an energy,
Hmm.
in a space, in a physical location. And I remember sitting during that conversation and thinking like how much I was learning and how interesting it was to me. But I think it's like just thinking about it now, looking in retrospect to what you and I have both done of unattaching, like detaching
Yeah.
from our emotional or even physical feelings and needs of security, perhaps even around
Mm-hmm.
physical spaces and leaving physical spaces that were, you left your where you've been doing your programming.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm leaving a home that I have lived in and raised my kids in for 20 years,
Yeah.
which takes a lot to move through.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I don't know, just another like woo-woo thing that Nydia was
Yeah,
our
I mean,
last
huge shifts,
conversation.
huge,
Yeah.
huge shifts, right? And for both of us, we can see how staying in places or spaces or decisions or, and again, for anybody listening, this could be a relationship, this could be a job,
Yeah.
like you insert into the blank what you're feeling attached to. And
Mm-hmm.
also, what are you being called to? Like that's what we keep sort of, right? That's the tightrope walking that we do as soul seekers, right? Like this is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing, but is this what I'm meant to be doing? And really kind of observing that. But I mean, I think both of us realize now when we're sort of attached, as we've been talking about, like you're staying small, right? You're not
Yeah.
growing, you're not expanding because we're scared, because there's fear there, and because we're, going or staying, right? And not going out of our comfort zone, right? And you and I
Yeah.
are, I think, pretty comfortable with risks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
So
there were
I
some that we were just like, I don't know.
yeah. Well, that's why I loved when you said about like it's the 8 year is about inviting you to like the next level of growth, the next level of evolution, the next level of breaking out of your comfort zone. It's a little exhausting that it doesn't stop. That doesn't stop. And also, I have found this year in particular there's more ease involved in it. The
Mm.
decisions, oddly enough, for me this year have been way bigger and more consequential than some of the small stuff I've sweated. Maybe in the last year, I had some bigger decisions about 3 years ago, but like in the last couple
Oh
of
yeah,
years, like
sure.
the
Yeah.
decisions were a little smaller, but I feel like I wore them a lot heavier, and it was harder for me to like move through them. And this year feels very different because I do feel like it is a next level. It's like, okay, I did a lot of work. I really did a lot of work around limiting beliefs, around letting go and composting what used to serve me and not making it be a bad thing that it was that way, or that belief had its hold on me, or that person was part of my life, or that experience happened, or name the thing, right?
Right,
Doesn't
right.
matter.
Yep.
But using it as like a composting, as we look right now at the trees getting ready to lose their leaves, right? The leaves don't actually die. The leaves go back down into the ground and they compost back up give the tree nutrients to come up with new leaves next year. So I've really this year been doing a lot of that, like trying to reframe experiences and things. And I have moved through so much faster and with not as much suffering or struggle or angst, and everything has felt much smoother. It's still been work, but there's been a joy in the journey on it. I just wrote a
Love
recent
that.
blog.
Joy in the journey.
Yeah, I wrote a recent blog post about that, and I
Mhm.
had an experience which I'll save for the blog post, but and I really was struggling with something about whether to do it or not, but something happened in the process of the doing it. It was fun, and I actually just enjoyed the
Mhm.
process of
Mhm.
doing it. And I
Mhm.
think that is the gold, right? It's like
Absolutely.
you're going to go through it anyway. And so if you
Mhm.
could figure out a way if you could figure out a way to ease into it, and like you said, surrender, there is a lot of joy in the journey to be had. And I this year I've had it. It's been nice.
It's amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that's a great segue for the theme of season 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so another thing that I had been working on this year was really bringing a show, a theatrical experience called Spark to life, which
Yeah.
of course, Becki, you are such a big part of. And we haven't had a cast of 12 women who were part of the first production of Spark here in our community where we live in Westchester and Connecticut. Um, but the point I want to make about that is based on what you were talking about, which is what so much is what Spark is about. And it's this theme of, we can be going along in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like what we've been talking about in this conversation, right? whether it's, what we're doing, where we're living, have kids, don't have kids, married, not married, married and have kids, but don't want to be married, like whatever it is, in a job, don't want to be in the job, around toxic people, don't want to be around the toxic people, like whatever it is,
Uh-huh.
right? It's so varied, right? And then life being life will also trigger you, and you will come up against many things in your life that weren't expected, that are there to either teach you a lesson or give you a blessing. Or a lot of times, what I like to say is the blessing is in the lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I call a spark moment. That moment where something in your life, the trajectory of your life has completely changed for better or for worse. And through that experience, right, you have, well, one of two things could happen most likely. You actually are jolted into remembering who you are, right?
Yeah.
Or you realize that there is something happening that may be reminding you on such a subtle level who you are and why you're here and what you're
Mm-hmm.
meant to do, because you weren't even expecting it or thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so Spark, the theatrical experience, features real, raw stories that are told through the voices of women, and it's spoken word, and it's original music that you wrote along with our friend Lynn and performed so beautifully in the show. And it's movement, and all of these very raw and very vulnerable stories
Yeah.
actually illustrate not only the human experience and how we're all connected, but just how resilient we are,
Yeah.
right? And through those
Yeah.
experiences, whether, things have been burned down to clear a path for the person that's experiencing something, again, I just go back to this, like, trust and then grow, because that
Mm-hmm.
we so incredibly saw from the women who were sharing their stories on that
Oh
stage,
yeah.
how
Oh
the
yeah.
audiences responded, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna, I mean, that's the part I really would like to touch on for people who didn't experience Spark in July. I really hope that you can come and join us in November. From the audience perspective, it's I was in the musicians kind of pit, so I was closer to the audience perspective than Tammy and the performers who we're going to be interviewing this season on Spark.
Yeah, they're going to
The
be guests on
Spark
the
season. They're
show.
going to be guests. That's what this season is all about. We're going to be talking about Spark in anticipation of the November run. But the audience, I mean, so many people that I know that attended and I spoke to at the end, every single one of them, they were completely blown away. I think first off, they weren't exactly sure what to expect.
Right. This is a
And
different experience, right?
it's so different. And I think people really walked away feeling like not only did they have an experience of witnessing someone else's story, but in an odd way of being witnessed by themselves, right? Like there was something powerful happening when those women were telling their stories. It cracks something open in the person who's watching it to see a story. Maybe it's a similar story, or maybe there's just an essence of their story that is pulling on something inside of them that cracks something open in them that has them witness themselves in a different way. So it is a really, it's hard to describe, and which we're going to do this season. We're going to do our best to describe it.
Mhm.
Um, but what we're trying to put words around something that was more of a feeling and more of an experience, and
Yeah.
something that really, the energy shifted every single performance that we did. It was different every time because the people were different, even though the monologues were the same, the music was the same, the format was the same, the people who attended were different. And so the energy in the space was different. And it was different at the beginning and it was different at the end. And to me, that's what was so really kind of like enrapturing about the Spark experience, was just that um, alchemizing that was happening in the room, in the space, just from women being brave enough to stand and share very vulnerable, very honest, very heartfelt stories. There's just power in that. There's just
Yeah,
power.
it was really palpable too.
Hmm.
The gasps from the audience, the
Yeah.
laughter, the
Hmm.
people crying or sharing or hugging by the end in the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that I was definitely struck by. And I think, you captured so many elements of it so beautifully, right? And for me, again, it became more and more crystal clear at the beginning of this year what I was meant to do with
Yeah.
not only my own voice, but this platform that I have been working very hard at and really wanting it to be meaningful and purposeful, not only because I spend a lot of time and energy,
Hmm.
in my life working this way, but also for the people that are part of this community, and also thinking about how can I serve even beyond my own community, right? And
Hmm.
so one of the things that became very crystal clear for me very early in this part of the year, as we were just thinking about the music and thinking about how things were going to go, right? Um, and meeting women and really working with them on their stories and getting to know them, it became very clear to me that there's this intersection of healing arts and sort of
Hmm.
also like this woo woo container that we're building here,
Hmm.
and performing arts, right?
Yeah.
Where, all of these elements that are spark, music and spoken word and movement, and it goes on, how they can really intersect, bringing the audience into this very intimate experience, right? And how people can be healed, changed, just utterly feel different from when they walked in to when they left. And then what then happens in the world or in people's homes or communities or in their own lives from there. So for
Yeah.
me, that became like really, for me, very crystal clear. Okay, this is what I want to do with my life. Now, I may be
Yeah.
doing all other things, and you are going to be doing all other things, but that intersection is like very important.
Yeah.
So I am so excited for this season, season 4, which we're calling the Spark Experience.
Hmm.
Um, and we will meet the director of Spark. We will meet some of the women who stood up on that stage and told their very real and wild stories at times,
Hmm.
and just how different they are as a result.
Yeah.
And these transformations. We're basically witnessing transformations of women, and we're going to probably expand even to men and just kind of keep going on and on and on with this. But anyway, we've got an exciting season of Spark lined up.
Yeah.
I'm ready to get at it. So,
Me too. Me too.
and with that, I would like to just
Oh.
end this episode by saying it only takes a spark. And
Hmm.
Becki and I, something definitely sparked when we met.
Hmm. Hmm.
And now we've been on this journey for a few years now, I have to say.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. So thanks for listening. Thanks for
Yeah.
hanging in and going through all the things with us.
Indeed. And we hope you enjoy this season of Spark. And we more than anything hope to see you live at one of the shows. If you listen to the show, please come up and definitely tell us, say hello,
Absolutely.
tell us about the show and say hi, and we'll see you at Spark. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Woo Woo in the Real World. We are so excited to get this Spark season going with our first guest, Beth, who was
No
our
pressure.
director. No pressure, Beth. But
Thank you.
you were the director of Spark. And so we thought that this would be a great place to start, would be with you to talk about the experience of directing this
Mm.
theatrical experience. But before we kind of jump into everything, would you let the good people know who you are and what you do?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having
Welcome,
me.
Beth.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's always great and special to see both of your faces. Uh, and I'm just honored to be a part of this, as I was honored to be a part of Spark. So this is super
Mm.
exciting. My name is Beth, as you said, and What do I do? I am a director and right now mostly writing actually for TV as well as film. I'm also a mom.
Which is amazing because,
So
yeah,
amazing.
we all wear many hats,
We
right?
do.
Mhm,
We do.
Wild. Um, so, you know, I'm so excited to get into this juicy conversation with you, first of all.
Okay. Okay.
But, you know, I have to say right off the bat, you mostly and predominantly focus in TV and film.
Mhm.
And this was really the first time I think you had mentioned to me that you directed a theater show, right?
Mm.
100%.
So in a way, you had a little spark moment with this production.
Oh, definitely. I had multiple spark moments, I would say.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Ooh.
you know, let's talk about that, right? So
Sure.
you know, first and foremost, you know, we are part of a community where, you know, you and I did not know each other.
Mm-mm.
We met at this little creative workshop
Mhm.
that we signed up for, as
Mhm.
one does in the suburbs. If you are creative and you're not in the
Yeah,
city all the time, you're like, where are my people, right?
totally. Totally.
And so we had fun and we did some improv and we did some fun things. And then, of course, we have mutual friends. And
Mhm.
before you know it, we were having coffee. And
Yeah.
I wanted to know more about you, and you wanted to know more about me and Spark. And we left that coffee meeting with like, okay, you're the director of Spark, right? You're the director
I was like, I think, yes.
Yeah.
of
And I think
Spark.
that's one of the cool things about Spark actually is
Yeah.
that the majority of the women, some of the women knew
Yes.
each other, but the
Yes.
majority of us did not know each other before we
Right.
started on this journey, like this really vulnerable, really deep journey. And we did not know each other. I mean, I remember
Right.
when Tammy, when you said, I met this woman, she's amazing. I think she could be a director, which at the time, I don't even know if you had in your mind that we needed a director, but I think it just
Mm.
organically felt like Beth needs to be part of this. This is kind of
Mm.
meant to be. The whole thing all kind of came together so organically. So I love your origin story about being in a creative experience together, and then
Yeah.
here you came.
Yeah. It's funny. I really believe in the concept of spark. And when I first spoke with Tambra, I, well, to be very honest, to give you even more of a backstory, I had just moved to the area. My family and I, we didn't really move in until the end of November. When you and I had coffee, it was probably early in the year. It was February-ish.
Must have been,
But I
yeah.
had
Of this year
heard,
of 24?
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
And so I knew there was definitely an intention that I had of I can finally kind of, plant my roots. This is my home now. And wow, it's so important to me that I, meet like-minded women, creative women, because that's such an important part of who I am. And as a newish mom, something that maybe I put on the back burner a little bit. And now I felt like I had space for that. And I was very lucky to learn that where we live is right near this very creative studio for women by women. Shout out to Yellow Studio.
Yellow
And
Yeah.
Studio.
and I had heard Tammy, you and I were at that workshop and I was just so excited to be there. And I didn't meet you that much at the workshop,
Right.
but someone had mentioned there's this woman and she's putting together this project of other like-minded women and they're writing personal stories. And I basically was like, I need to meet her. So there
Love
was a
that.
little bit of intention on my side, but it didn't
Mhm.
have to work.
That's
Luckily,
right.
luckily it worked. And not only did it work when I didn't know really the theme of Spark. And when I spoke with you, Tammy, about what it was, I was like, these are the stories that have kind of appealed to me as a storyteller for so long. Some of my
Mm.
earlier films and some of the things I worked on um, when I was in film school, like writing and directing and really trying things out, I was really into the idea of your life turning into the before and the after.
Mm.
That's how I talked about it. Tammy said spark. You kind of called it the spark moment. And so when I
Mhm.
heard a little more about this project that I had kind of like heard just from other people, I was like, oh, tell me more.
Mhm.
So it felt really good just from the get-go.
Yeah. And I think, to your point too, Becki, I didn't really say I have this director role that I want to fill, right?
Right, right.
And then also it was really important because women were basically, we were getting together around my dining room table and we were just talking and sharing stories and opening up about what is the story inside that needs to come out. In that process, you have to be so careful and so supportive, right? We're holding space for these women. I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel comfortable sharing. And I want them to know that at the end of the day, this is about you and your story and what you want to tell, right? And I also was like, wow, I had a moment where I was like, this is a big responsibility that I'm taking on, right?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
this is huge and it's very important to me. At the same time, you have to balance the fact that this is a production. This is a show. This is going to come to life on a stage somewhere. And at that time, I had no idea where or when. And I wasn't forcing that particular outcome. I was really just kind of exploring, knowing that one day this will happen, right? I didn't know it was going to happen in July. That's sort of like it all started to alchemize and come together. And I think when I sat down and had coffee with you, Beth, it's one of those beautiful, sparkly things because as you were talking and we were sharing, it was like, oh, we are so aligned, right? But also, your disposition, your personality, who you are as a person. I was saying to myself, having had all of those conversations with women already at that point, she can really hold the space for them. I know. I just met you, right? But I just had this overwhelming feeling. It was a gut feeling that, yes, you're a director. Yes, you have these skills, right? But you also had the temperament and you were just the human that needed to do this, right? And I was so fortunate that you said yes and you felt the same way. So that's really how it happened, right? And Becki and I were talking, in our kickoff episode about, I have these 3 words of surrender, trust, right? And then grow. And that was a surrender moment for me, right? Also like giving up control in many ways, right?
That's true. Yeah, it's tricky. Very tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel uh honored that you felt that way. And the feeling was mutual. I mean, and it was clear to me that this is a precious production, if you will. And I realized from the very beginning when I started reading everybody's pieces that these were very personal stories. And it's one of the challenges that I loved is that, okay, also, and maybe I'm getting ahead a little bit, but we were working with women who hadn't necessarily written pieces to be read by others, let alone performed in front of an audience. So one of the things I enjoy about directing is creating this very special relationship. I take pride in the work that I do with actors, and it was no different for this. Is that at the end of the day, we're all human, and we're going to try to create a language, and the language that I create with one person about their piece, it's going to be different than the language I create with someone else, because the experience they're bringing to it is different. And that's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I enjoy. And so it not only was this precious, I know, Tammy, to you, because it was something that you had already put so much work into, but also these women were expressing very vulnerable, profound moments that needed to be handled with care.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want everyone to feel safe, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see the whole process unfold in terms of you coming in, because we had been meeting as a group several times, and the pieces were like pretty far down the road.
Yeah.
So, just for the people who are listening, and even if you saw the show or even if you haven't seen the show, it's not like that Beth came in and directed anyone's piece to be a certain way. the pieces were pretty done. I mean, like the
Mhm.
foundation arcs were what they were. People's
Mhm.
stories were what they were.
Mhm.
And watching you come in, Beth, and really just completely and totally honor the story of each woman, because also each, as it, especially as it got closer and everybody's like, oh God, I actually have to perform this. I have to deliver this, right?
Yeah.
And so many of the performers were not, this was not kind of something that they do to get up
Right.
and perform a piece about their personal life, like that was a
Right.
very new thing. And I think everyone wanted the show to be the best it could be. They wanted their piece to be the best it could be.
Mhm.
And it was holding the line of, yes, we want everything to be the best that it can be, and it has to stay, absolutely, the fidelity has to stay there for that woman's story.
Yeah.
And Tammy and I spoke in our intro, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on this, because you also saw the show from the
Mhm.
audience,
I saw it every night.
ultimately. Yeah, you saw every night from
Every
so
night.
I'm kind of curious, because I felt like I had a little bit of a different perspective, because where we were
Mhm.
sitting as musicians was not on the stage. So
Absolutely.
I kind of felt a little bit like a bridge between
Yeah.
participant and audience. And then you were even farther, back of house, kind of watching from way back.
Right.
Um, but there was something so interesting about each woman's piece being so uniquely theirs,
Mhm.
that somehow that's the magic for, I think, the audience, because
Mhm.
there's just there was like a little bit of something for everyone in
Yes.
in the
Yes.
show. So I'm just kind of curious from your perspective. I mean, if you want to talk at all about, and you kind of already did, about
Mhm.
how you help the women
Mhm.
move through and hold true to their story,
Yeah.
expand on that if you would like. But I'm also curious about watching the show
Yeah.
from the director's role, and how the experience was with the audience and the
Yeah.
participants. Like, what was your view on that?
Oh, there's so much to touch upon. So it's like, I love talking about this. So, right. I think you brought up, and I think I brought up a little bit, like the unique challenge was the very personal, unique stories of each woman. And as we got closer, it was tough love is the wrong word, but start to, by a certain point, I think we worked a lot about like theme, really
Mhm.
honing in on what is everyone's story about, because there did come a point where, and this was a little delicate, where I was starting to say, we want to think about the audience a little bit. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want anyone to feel as though I am asking them to veer off the path or veer off their theme. But, and a bit of an uncomfortable but, is we also want to think about time, right? We want to think about projection. And that was tough, because this is, now we're talking about performance. And there's, this concept of, being an auteur and really being true to the story you want to tell. But we
Mm-hmm.
are putting on a show, if you will, and there will be people watching this. And we want to, I felt
You
like
have
my
paid money, by the way.
that too. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
this was a
yeah.
real people. This is people taking time out of their Friday, Saturday, or Sundays to see this. And so we have to keep them in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's a challenge and also a reality
Mhm.
of doing what everyone signed up to do, right? So it was that balance of making everyone feel comfortable, and knowing that, my intention, I'm here to protect their story, but also make it the best that it can be for the audience, so that, Becki, when you're sitting where you are, where I'm sitting where I am, hopefully we're feeling a reciprocated energy. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want this disconnect. And it's really true. I've done it in my own screenings for films, where you really can feel when the audience is in lockstep with what's going on stage or on screen. And you can also
Mhm.
feel when they're not.
Mm.
And so that was kind of the first part of gradually getting everyone in the mindset of, this is my story, this is my theme. What has to be part of this story and what doesn't? And a lot of times that came because we had to keep things to a certain time, Or we also had to really, and I've been there as someone who's written and directed some of my own personal stuff. It's really hard. So sometimes I was a mirror. Sometimes I might have been a mirror that the women weren't necessarily thrilled about at first, but then we did a lot of talking. We did some exercises on, like what's your elevator pitch? And then really the test was, like you were saying, being in the audience. And so I'm talking about a lot of things, but you were talking about a little something for everyone in the audience. Something I talked about a lot during our sessions is this concept that I learned a while ago, which is the more specific you make it, the more universal it becomes. So sure, not everyone in the audience, one story was about, it was a bit of an adoption story. Another story, I hope I'm not giving too much away.
No, that's fine. You can totally, yeah.
Another story is about almost becoming playing a motherly role much later in life, unexpectedly. These are very unique experiences that none, if or maybe a few in the audience can relate to. But the more specific that everyone's story is, the more authentic it is, everyone can relate to that personal that moment in their life, their spark moment. Everyone has one. And so the hope was to keep everyone's stories authentic and personal, no matter what we needed to do to make it performance ready. And I think and hope we accomplished that. And to answer your question, Becki, when I was in the audience, there was this like amazing energy. People were nodding. People were, I was able to hear that. I was able to see people lean forward. I was able to, maybe see a look to the left, like a nod. So I hope that the performers felt the same way too, that they were able to still, be authentic, but also tell a story that's special to them that that resonated with others. That was really a lengthy answer, but there's just a lot to tell.
Exactly, right? And
there's a lot to tell, yeah.
And what I also love about it is we could ask that question to everybody in the cast or the production, and we could also ask that question to everybody who came to the show, and everybody would have probably their own unique answer.
Totally.
Right?
And that's important.
Like some aspect of it touched them in some way. And then other people that, we've also spoken to, it's, then there was this other aspect that touched their lives, right? That's just one of these factors that, we've been talking about a lot, about this interconnectedness, right? And how we all just walk around with these masks of, who we're supposed to be or think we're supposed to be, or, we're walking through the world and our lives as people pleasers, or want to be the good girl, or any number of labels, right, that we put on ourselves, or, other people have placed on us, right? And there becomes this moment of, I'm just not that person, right? Whether you realize it yourself or something occurred in your life that made you realize that, right?
Exactly.
So to touch on what you had mentioned earlier about, one of the performers on the stage tells this very raw story. She was getting married later in life, right? She was just about like coming up on her wedding day. And she and her fiance get a call from Child Protection Services about the granddaughter, who is 19 months old, who needs to come live with them, which they didn't think was going to be actually a reality, right? Like, or it was going to be like a week from now, or no, it was 10 o'clock that night from getting the phone call, whether it was that afternoon or whenever it occurred. They are delivered a baby.
She's
in
like,
a car,
literally,
handed this baby who was not wearing shoes, right? And all of a sudden, they become parents, foster parents to their own granddaughter, right? And the woman telling the story, she was not a mother. She had not been married. She spoke very candidly and in a real raw way about how selfish she was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had experienced other things in her life, such as stage 4 breast cancer that apparently popped up out of nowhere. She talked about her battles of drug and alcohol addiction. So, and now here she is. She's come through all of that. She's getting married, and now she's delivered a 19-month-old baby.
Yeah.
And it was powerful, right?
Yeah.
And every story had these kinds of experiences or moments. They were unique to the woman telling those stories,
Yes.
right? And how they've come out on the other side. And that's what I mean by this interconnectedness, right?
Yes.
Of all of us and the resiliency of the human spirit, but also why we need to talk about it.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you
Yeah.
called me Tambra earlier in the podcast.
I did.
You
I'm
know,
still, yes, I know.
I love it. I love it. Right. So that's part of my spark moment. I had always
Yes.
been ashamed of my own name throughout my entire life. And come to find out, I mean, it means palm tree and goddess of the rising moon. So I'm embracing that name and I am not ashamed of it anymore. Right. But I had met Luz, who also is a woman in the show, and she has a whole name story.
Yeah.
Right.
But
So that's
different.
what I mean by the interconnectedness, the being willing to open up and to share, right? Means that, oh my gosh, I don't need to feel ashamed about this anymore. You've had an experience like that too?
Right.
Wow. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So Beth, do you want to share any of your own personal spark moment
Oh, wow.
with anyone that might be listening? I don't mean to put you on the spot. You could also say no, but
I mean,
or could you,
sure. I could,
yeah, I was also say, or another track on that could be anyone's particular story that you heard during Spark that you felt really resonated for you personally. Either
oh,
way, up
wow.
to
I
you.
mean,
To you.
I'll do a little bit of both.
Okay.
Well, because I don't want to ignore either question. I needed a beat to think about my own moment. I mean, I didn't. I know exactly what the moment is, but it's a bit intense. But we can go there. But to answer, everyone, I would say one woman. Can I use names? Can I use names? I was going to say Shelley's. Shelley talked a lot about motherhood and I think as someone who I'm beginning my motherhood journey, I would say. So a lot of what she talked about kind of like refinding yourself after becoming a mom, resonated with me. Which also, for that reason, I push really hard at times because I think there's a rawness to it. And, I think the way that her piece ended up was there was a moment, I'm not going to give anything away, but there was a moment and she really like went there in terms of like the words she used and the action she put to it. And the audience like gobbled it up. But it was, I also think not only was it entertaining, but I think it really like probably resonated with a lot of women out there.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, but I would say truthfully, there was something about everyone's story that resonated with me. And like you were saying earlier, I think and hope that the audience maybe felt that way too. And Tamara, to go back to what you were saying, the more that, and it's hard to be open. It's hard, especially when some of these moments are very vulnerable and represent some really low and tough moments. So I have found every time that I have been vulnerable or open, it only brings more. And so with that, my spark. So one of the reasons that I became very intrigued by those moments that separate our lives into before and after. And I don't know if maybe this feels a little at first detached from the beauty of Spark, but we'll get there. when I was young, when I was 19, my first love, my first boyfriend passed away very suddenly. And I mean, I remember at the time, like writing in my journal, like this, like everything from now on will be after this tragedy. Um, and it's a bit of the truth. There's been now other things that are before, before motherhood, after motherhood, but this, and this is something that is for a long time and still is a part of like who I am as an artist, really hone, and it's why I connected with Tambra. I go back and forth between Tambra and
That's
Tammy.
great. Most people do. Fine. It's all good.
Yeah, about these like profound moments, and for me, the way that this like sudden, really tragic, hard event has shaped who I am as a person is given me an appreciation for love and for every bit of love in my life. I'm getting emotional.
I know, you're
But
gonna make me emotional too.
you don't take anything for granted. My life now is beautiful. I have a beautiful son. I have a beautiful husband. There were times after where I was like, I am so unlucky. And at that time, like, how could this have
Sure,
happened
you were
to
so
me?
young,
So
right?
young and
Yeah.
so sudden and so tragic. And I remember, I think like a year or so after something was going on and being like, I'm so lucky. And having this moment of like, oh, I will feel lucky again. This isn't going to define my life. I will love again. And I never stopped believing in love and the power of love and the beauty that can exist with love. I think because I was so young and it was this like heightened romantic relationship and like really my first love, my first boyfriend, everything. I think, it kind of held things at a pedestal for better or worse. To me, there's this preciousness that I'd like to think everyone has, but I also like to think that, what my concept of love and the way I view it and the way I view my relationships with the people in my life, I think I hold them extra tight, and I think they're that much more beautiful because of what I went through. So as much that is it was a hard moment, but it's a beautiful song that plays throughout my life in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing
thanks
that
for giving
on
me
the
the give.
show, right?
Thanks.
And while you were speaking and also throughout this conversation that we're having, I think, when we talk about woo-woo in the real world, like Becki and I, it's a fun phrase that we came up with, right? Based on conversations, actually real conversations that we were having about our own lives, about our own experiences, and things that we were doing as soul seekers, right? To understand these things, or to really come to grips with meaning and purpose in this crazy human experience, right?
Yeah.
And because so much of what is now, called woo-woo is in the mainstream, right? Which is actually a good thing, because the more people that become conscious, the more people that, focus on their own issues and help heal, resolve, etc., the more compassionate and loving they will be as humans, and the world will be overall, right?
Yes.
But there's a lot of like, well, if I just burn some sage, then it all disappears and I don't ever have to do anything,
Oh,
right?
if only. I'd have a
Right?
lot of
Or, oh, I
sage.
had this
Yeah.
tarot reading and now I'm good. I got my answers, right? Or
Totally enlightened now.
totally enlightened, right? Went to
Yeah.
yoga, and it's like,
Right.
I meditated, but it's like, what happens after those
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Those are all wonderful tools, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
then we live life and stuff happens.
Mhm.
And so I guess, what these conversations are and what Spark is hoping to inspire is that we should have more conversations
Oh,
like
yeah.
this, right? I
Yeah.
mean, your story of loss for somebody who might be a young woman sitting in the audience who just experienced that, who now sees you as, you know, a mother and in a
Mhm.
relationship and with a career, how much hope
Mhm.
and inspiration will she give? You know,
Yeah.
one of the performers who talked about her eating disorder in Spark, right, as part of the track
Mhm.
of her childhood and life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, my young niece was sitting in the audience, a
Mhm.
teenager who struggled
Mhm.
and still does with an eating disorder, right?
Mhm.
Who
Mhm.
was incredibly inspired and in awe of hearing Serena's story.
Yeah.
In fact, at the end of the show, which is a hokey little thing that I love to do with my jar of affirmations, my young family member showed me the affirmation that she got, and it was, "Your
Oh.
body is beautiful."
Oh my
And we
Oh,
gosh.
were blown
wow.
away. She's like, that's why she was showing me. She's like, I can't believe I got this. Like,
Yeah.
and I
I
said,
can.
there are no coincidences. Like, I have some
Right.
wisdom on this right now. You're just starting on this journey. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, and it goes back to the story that you shared. Like, you know, it was too young for you to experience that level
Mhm.
of tragedy and
Mhm.
trauma and
Mhm.
sadness,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I even speak about in one of my pieces in Spark is how these traumas and experiences are stored in our physical body, right?
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
really have to, the first step is just recognizing it and being aware of it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and as you said, I'm sure even to this day, I mean, it was so beautiful how you characterized it as a song,
Mm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
but it's never going to go away.
Right.
It's part
That's
of
right.
Beth's story now.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And the song changes. It'll
Yeah.
change. And as I move through my life, you know, my just like I'm sure every woman on stage, their story, if you know 10 years from now there's a Spark reunion and we say, you know, take that story that you had done X amount of 10 years ago. Now what? How
Yeah.
write it now, right? It's probably different. And that's the beauty of life,
Mhm.
right? Also,
Mhm.
it's the beauty of, you know, connection and perhaps you know, there was one of our storytellers talked about kind of a physical ailment that they had and now they, you know, help people with
Mhm.
similar situations. And so, you know, that time had passed and it became something that helped her kind of discover who she was or who she is. So similarly, I'm sure as we move through our lives and look back, you know, our spark moment, it's we're going to have, I think, a handful of spark moments, but
Always.
the
Yeah.
the way we view it will probably change as our lives have changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
ever evolving.
It really is. And also the thing when you were telling your own story and hearing the stories of the women, I think that the real magic is not always so much in the identification of the before and the after.
Mm,
It's the what the hell happened in between.
mm,
Because
mhm,
that's where I feel like people feel the most lonely and the
mm.
most lost, and they
Yes.
feel all alone, right? It's
Yes.
in that horrible in between ground of the before and the after, where you feel like you are a drowning person. And so you are looking for someone else's story, but you don't want the highlight reel of their story. You
Yes.
want the story. Like
Yes.
you want the guts. What the hell happened? How did you feel? Because I'm feeling that way. And okay, so that's not unusual. And I feel like that's what's so good about the Spark pieces, and that you, Beth, as a director, like so masterfully helped everyone really dial in without, because we were, you know, it's a time limit. Nobody wants to hear a story that drones on forever
Tricky.
and
I
ever and
know
ever.
it's so
You
hard.
know, it's
Yeah.
just like nobody wants to see your vacation photos. It's like, you know, that's why we put the highlights up on Instagram, right? Because
Yeah.
people like, you know, they don't always want like every little detail.
Right.
And by the
But
way, doesn't Instagram limit the reel length to 1 minute?
yeah,
I believe,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Or
a
it cuts your
reason.
story off. It cuts your reel off, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but people do want more than the
Hmm.
superficial fast food version, right?
Right.
They want a nutritious bite. right?
Yep.
They want a nutritious little meal to help nourish them through what they're going through. And I think as a director, um, you did that. I mean,
Mhm.
you kept the nourishing details and went from the start to the fit. Like you got to see the before and the after, but you
Mm,
also got to see the middle and really not just see it, but you could feel it of how these people were moving through that really
mhm.
horrible spot in the middle. Um, so I mean, hats off to you for doing that. I'm curious, in your experience, I mean, is that something hard to get to the essence of? Like,
Mm.
is that something you do in your work always for people who might be looking in just in their day-to-day lives of how they
Right.
can share an experience?
Mm,
Um, but I think sometimes people refrain from giving too much detail because they think people don't care about the
right,
detail.
right.
But that's where I think the most help is. So just
Mhm.
from a director who did this, who helped
Mhm.
these women like thread that needle, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
what advice would you give, or what did you use as a guiding principle for keeping the healthy parts that help people
Right.
through?
Wow. It's funny. I mean, because a lot of this goes back to the writing, and I came in a little bit. I think, like you said, a lot of the foundation had already been laid. Um, from like a more technical perspective, something that some directors have, they have a method that they kind of go by. Stanislavski, Uta Hagen, Six Steps. They'll really, they're like, this is what I default to. I come from a place of having, uh, again, from a technical perspective, having learned all of those, but I
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep them all in my tool belt. And you might not notice it, but when I'm on set or in this situation, when I was talking to people, when people were reading, I was watching very carefully their body language. I was listening very hard to, when they were feeling comfortable with the words, when they weren't. And then
Mm.
there was, I think, 2 or 3 times where I dove deep and started asking questions. And it sounds, I don't know, it's a little less technical, but I really kind of lean into their energy, and I
Mm.
really try to use as much, because again, this is very different than film or TV, where maybe we have
Yeah.
some rehearsals or we've had at least auditions and I know how these people work. But similarly, some of the TV shows I do, I don't have rehearsal time. And so I just really try to key into what's working for them and what's not, and find a language that works. So again, the way I might speak to one woman is going to be different than the way I speak to another. And I didn't want to force anyone too much. There were places where I maybe felt, oh, this could go this route, or they could maybe go down that path and talk about XYZ, but this wasn't the place necessarily, I felt, to really push or do something they're not
Mm-hmm.
100% in line for, because it would probably backfire. And
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, like, if it doesn't feel right, like for scripts or anything, like if it doesn't feel right on the page, it probably will still not feel right on
Mm.
screen or on stage. So here, if when I started talking to someone about, would you try XYZ? If it didn't feel right there, chances are when they're on stage, no matter how much they rehearse and practice, it's not going to feel authentic, and
Yeah.
the audience will know.
Yep.
So a lot of what I did was really just try to be present, try to be as human as possible. Every once in a while, maybe take a tool out, but this was a lot less about the technicalities and a little bit more about the humanization, and really leaning into people's strengths
Mm-hmm.
and staying away from things that felt. I do think everyone was really pushed, but I had to be very respectful of boundaries,
Mhm.
uh, and um, and I didn't mind doing that. And I think, again, this was a performance, something different than I've done before. I think if we were to do this again and come in from the beginning, maybe there would be different opportunities. And if there's different women, there'd be different kinds of stories, and there'd be, so I worked with everyone differently because they came
Yeah.
to the table with not only different stories, but different experience. There were some women that
Yeah.
had done some performance. There were two comedians. So the way I would talk to them would be different maybe than I talk to someone else. So
Right.
hopefully that
And,
answered
you
your
know, I
question.
think it leveled the playing field though, even
Yeah.
if, you know, even for our comedians and actors in the group of women, this was a personal story. It wasn't, you know,
Mhm.
a script that was written for them and a character that they could just
Yeah,
slip into the skin of, right? It's like they had to be comfortable in their own skin,
Yeah.
sharing
exactly.
something deeply
Exactly.
personal. So that was really wild. But good news for you. I think that we will have a very interesting new addition to this run of Spark in November.
Oh, who's
Ooh.
that?
And
Oh,
so you will have the opportunity to take that particular storyteller from soup to nuts. And
I'm so excited.
it's an incredible story.
Oh, wow. Great.
And you know, just when we thought we've heard it all, we
No,
have
never,
we haven't.
never.
And that's
Mm-mm.
also what I love about this.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
Mm.
So when we
When's
log
the,
off,
I was going to say, when's the
I will
reveal?
I will give you the deets.
That's
But
awesome.
everybody that's listening, please buy a ticket for November 1st, 2nd, or 3rd
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean it's going to be a really powerful show as before, but there will also
Mhm.
be some new additions to this particular production that I think are absolutely going to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
But also the venue itself is something
Mm,
that I'm very excited about because first and foremost, like, you know, we did it at Bethany Arts Community in
mm.
Austin, New York, which is an amazing theater that we will actually go back and have another run there because it was so wonderful and magical, and the community there is awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I, you know, also want to bring Spark to other types of venues, other communities, near and far. And so for this particular production to be in a very raw space, which is it is the personal art studio and performance venue of an amazing artist that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Hopefully, he'll also be a guest on the show so people can
Cool.
hear more from him as well. But nothing like this has ever been performed there. So I'm excited. That will also
Wow.
bring its own unique set of challenges, probably, because we haven't been in this space yet. But I am excited for us as the production and the storytellers, but I'm also really excited for the audiences
Yeah.
to come and experience Spark this way. So more to come on that. But as the director, I think you will have even more fun now too.
I'm excited. I'm
But we'll
also,
see.
yeah. And also the storytellers, I'm so excited to see how it feels. Yes, it's a new venue, but now they have that experience. I think for some
Mhm.
of the women, this was their first time on stage, performing and performing something so personal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is now, they can't say that. They can't say it's their first time. So I think that they're going to bring a whole new perspective, a different kind of energy. And I'm really excited to see what that feels like.
So coming into the next production,
Mhm.
how do you think about that? How do you think about the audiences that are coming have never seen
Yeah.
this before? How do we keep it fresh and new and
For people who have not seen it yet.
Mhm. Even though the storytellers have done it before?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think, probably asking the women to, you rarely have the ability to like force yourself to think back, reflect, and like give an answer. And again, it's me being that mirror that they maybe like don't want to see or talk to. But,
Mhm.
you know, what did you feel afterwards? Did
Mm.
you leave everything on the stage? Like, did you feel like you got your story across? If
Mhm.
not, what would you do differently? I don't
Mm.
think it's I don't know if we have I don't think it's about rewriting or choosing a different story. I think, we spent a lot of time making sure that these were the spark stories, at least, for this run. Who knows what
Sure.
will come down the road.
Right.
But a matter of reflection and,
Mhm.
asking what would you change? What could you change? And also letting the space influence. You know, I'm excited to see the space. There was a lot of physicality in a lot of the women's work, but it's possible now that we have that first performance under our belt, or the first couple of performances under the belt. Maybe, maybe I have the option now to challenge people a little bit with some more blocking, some more physicality, which I think could just take things to a different level, which I think could be great for everyone, really, the performers and the audience.
Love it. And on that note, I think we will round out. I mean, honestly, we could talk to you forever.
I could talk to you guys forever.
So great. This is obviously such a juicy topic too. So I thought what I would do to round us out, because I occasionally like to do.
I love this. Wait, I think the last 2 seasons we've done, Tammy and I have done this at different points, and like, no joke, cards like would go flying out of the deck, and then inevitably the card would be exactly something we were just talking about.
Oh, this is so cool.
So some of our craziest woo-woo moments have come from the
universe
card shuffle
That's
at
some
the
good
end.
energy here, so I don't doubt it.
These cards just came flying down.
Okay.
So Beth, I'm not going to look at these cards, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pick a number.
3.
1, 2, 3. This is our card.
I can't read it.
I'm going to read it.
It looks like Fabio on the back of a horse.
This is a power card. Okay, so I don't have my glasses here, but it is the Knight of Water. Romantic. Flirtations. Introspective. Fickle. Falling in love. Being swept off your feet. A sudden love affair. Situations or topics that make your heart flutter. A love of art and poetry. Now,
well, so Spark definitely makes your heart flutter.
I got chills for the love of art. And
I mean, here we are having this conversation, right? So the Knight of Water, I just want to see what the book quickly says about the Knight of Water.
The Knight of Water.
Knight of Water.
I mean, I personally love water. You see my surfboards here.
No, Knight really, like water. So right at the top it says, "Well, hello, beautiful." This is what most people yearn for in romance. It's that feeling of being over the top, romantically, passionately, dreamily, head over heels in love. Your eyelids flutter and your heart is completely twitter-patted, whatever that means. Twitter-patted.
I don't know, but I want to try to use that word in the next 24 hours.
Please.
Oh my God.
The source of your affections is perfection personified, or so you think. There's poetry, roses, chocolates, candlelight, and love letters. Well, texts and emails anyway. You can't get anything else done because all your thoughts are stuck on this knight in shining armor. Could our knight be Spark? I don't know.
It could be.
An emotional intervention is probably underway. The question is, are you the one being healed or doing the healing? This knight is romantic, idealistic about love, dramatic, poetic, and utterly enchanting. Sounds amazing, right? Yeah, well, hold on just for a minute. This kind of emotional experience knocks you off balance. Whether this really is a romance or just something else in your life that has your heart all aflutter, you need to plant your feet flat on the ground and anchor your emotions and get some balance, right? And also, we are in this season of balance with this lunar eclipse. We're sort of like we're sandwiched in between, but it's also Libra season, which is the sign of balance. And here we are getting the big old Knight of Balance here.
Interesting.
I know.
I feel like
learn about this all the time.
I feel like I have like
I mean, it goes on, but it's just like, I think it's really kind of incredible how we're kind of in love with what we're talking about, and it's causing just like a lot of heartfelt emotion up in us, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Really interesting.
That's cool. I love it.
There's more to life than romance. It's okay to enjoy the experience, but don't lose yourself in it. Stay balanced and grounded. If you're the knight, pay attention to how you might hurt the other person.
Oh.
Interesting. Enthusiastic, captivating, passionate, idealistic, artistic.
Definitely.
A love of art and beauty, a trusted keeper of secrets, consoler,
Oh.
gushing emotional displays, powerful spiritual experiences, vivid, impactful nocturnal dreams. That's for you, Becki.
This whole card has so much in it for me on a personal
Oh,
I mean, it's
I'm
just
like,
right.
I
There
kind
are
of feel
no
like my energy
coincidences.
may have like swapped our card. Like,
this is Becki's
I feel like
card.
that made my card.
Move it over to Becki's world.
Okay.
So my
Anyway,
face is
I
all
think
red over
you are getting
here.
pretty flustered. Do tell,
Oh.
Becky.
That's another episode.
I was gonna say the after show.
When
Next
when
season will be dedicated to the night of
the
water.
night. What was that about?
Oh my gosh, I love
Right.
it.
But water is the suit of emotion, so that makes a lot of sense, right?
It does. It does.
It really does.
Anyway, so that's a bit of woo-woo anchoring this episode
I love it.
where we have enjoyed our time with Beth. Beth, say your last name, please.
Spitalny.
Spitalny. See,
Spitalny.
I'm
It's
so bad on
exact-
everybody's last name, so I never say them.
It's
But
funny. I didn't even say it, I think, when I introduced myself. 'Cause
Beth
Oh.
Spitalny.
it's
Love it.
exactly how it's spelled. It sounds exactly how it's spelled, but I think people they don't want to say like spit. And I'm like, oh,
Spitalny.
Spitalny. Okie dokes.
Mhm.
Well, it was
love
awesome having you on, Beth Spitalny.
Thank you for
Director
having
of the
me.
Spark Experience.
Yes.
Thank you
Amazing
both so
human,
much. Thank
talented,
you.
Excited to go
gifted.
into round 2 of Spark with
I
you.
can't wait. I can't wait. Thank
We'll
you
see you there.
both.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for
We'll see
having
you
me.
on the next episode. And remember, it only takes a spark, right, guys?
Only takes a spark.
Only takes a spark.